What's up, guys? I'm James Bainey, and I'm here to talk about another episode of The Bad Batch. This time, we're talking episode 9, The Harbinger. Ventress is back, guys. Ventress is back, and she's sort of like Omega's teacher. It's kind of crazy. Put those two together, would have never seen it coming. If she wasn't in the trailer, honestly, I know we've been leading up to predictions. We've been thinking, well, I guess this is the episode where she comes back. It all sort of led to that. Could you imagine, though, if she wasn't in the trailer and we just all turn it on today and she comes walking out of those shadows? Oh my gosh. It would have been crazy. It almost makes me wish they didn't put her in the trailer. I understand why they have to. I think it was an interesting rollout for Ventress because they told us she was coming and it was very predictable that it was coming. But I really think that it would have been cool if it just was like, we're processing the whole episode. Maybe that would have been worse. Maybe they showed it to people and they couldn't process it. They're like, they spent the whole episode not taking in what they were trying to tell, but more along the lines of like, I just don't get it. Like, why is she alive? And they don't really explain that either. We'll get to that later. But yeah, Ventress is back, and honestly, this was a great episode. I really had a good time with Ventress. And that's the thing, I can't really think of things that I didn't like about this episode. I do have my least favorite thing, but it's very specific. I mostly did like this episode, and I mostly liked it because of Ventress. It actually sort of made me a fan of that character. Asajj Ventress has always just sort of been around for me. It's not that I disliked the character. She just sort of existed for me as part of the story. She has had some pretty terrible things that I've somewhat connected with as far as like Dooku's apprenticeship, and she later had a relationship with Quinlan Vos, and that was kind of brought up in that story, and I really liked that book. But I don't know, maybe I'm just kind of being reminded of my feelings for Ventress, because in this episode, I think some of the things that she said about how we're the same because we were both pawns in the same war, it's like, I think maybe the gravity of her character and how much she's seen is sinking in more than just where you really familiarize yourself with her in the Clone Wars, just as this one entity that's sort of like a bad guy sidekick or something along those lines. And I know that's not really it, but sometimes that's just kind of how it felt in the Clone Wars, is that whenever she showed up, we're like, oh, we know this character, we know who it is, she's going to do the bad thing, and then we're going to have to stop her, whatever. I think now we're getting to a point with Ventress, which is good, that she can be more because she has a big history with things that have happened in the galaxy. So I don't know. It, like I said, I think it just made me a fan of this character more than I ever have been. But I think the biggest reason that I liked this episode was the writing, was the layout of the story, because I fell for the story 3 times in this episode, and I think that's what really made it interesting. And in all 3 times, I thought to myself, that's not what would happen, actually. Or that doesn't make any sense. And I'll tell you what those 3 are. But before we get there, I want to talk a little bit about midichlorians, because they talk about midichlorians in this episode. I just was blown away. I was surprised they said the word. They've been kicking around it for a while with M-count, which we all know what they're talking about. We first heard that term in The Mandalorian, so it's been around. They're using the term M-count now, and I think we've sort of accepted that that was in place of midichlorian, and they'll probably never say that again, because as soon as they say that, it ruins everything. But then she continues to give us more details about how that works, but also all the details that she gives us are things that we already knew. It's just interesting, because she says it's a blood thing. They're found in the blood, and it is believed that everybody has them, and some people have more of them, but if you have more of them, you're more likely to be attuned to the Force. I guess if you put together everything that we know about midichlorians, we already knew all this information. But it is nice to kind of have someone come out and say, in any sort of official capacity, not like Dave Filoni, but like actually within canon, that we have someone who is very attuned to the Force and has all these abilities saying, this is what I know about them. You know, everybody has them, but they don't actually give you the Force. It's believed that if you have more of them, you're more likely to be someone who is able to use the Force. So it's all kind of there. It's sort of backpedaling, but it's not actually backpedaling because George said all that stuff. So I just thought it was really interesting that I talked about midichlorians. I ate that stuff up. I am a fan of that. I don't know how other people feel about that. It doesn't seem like it's very well accepted. But I also think that, you know, the prequels weren't very well accepted, and now they are. So maybe we should have more talks about midichlorians. I don't know. Let me know if you want to hear more about midichlorians sometime. But these are the 3 times that I fell for the story and loved it, that I actually fell for the story. So it made me like go, yes, yeah, what a great episode. I was like on the ride the whole time. And the first one was, I love that she was never actually testing Omega's M count. The first thing that happened was Omega comes up and says, you test my M count. How can you do that? You know, I'd have to test you first. Well, okay. But it didn't make sense to me. I was like, this is confusing. They already know she has an high M count. So what would testing her actually accomplish? We're going to get the number and go, yep, you do have a high M count and the Empire is already after you. Ventress didn't do that. She didn't test her M count. She tested her ability to use the Force. Omega doesn't know that. The Bad Batch doesn't know that. But I'm sitting there and I'm going, well, this doesn't make any sense. And then it dawns on me, of course, Ventress doesn't care about her M count number. She cares if she's actually someone who has the ability to use the Force. She's looking for maybe allies, maybe apprentices, maybe enemies. I don't know. But the M count number doesn't mean anything to her. She's actually, and we already know she has it because the Empire is in fact after her. So I love that as the episode went on, it became more clear that Asajj was just kind of like pulling strings. She's like, I guess I'll do a test that lets me know if you have a high M count or not, and then proceeds to actually test her Force abilities, which is pretty cool. It was misleading at first, and I thought it was confusing, and maybe they messed up, or I didn't, wasn't following it properly or something along those lines. But then I realized I got it, and Asajj just actually is sort of one step above everybody else, and she's actually testing what she wants to know more about, which is Omega's abilities. Very cool. I fell for it, but I'm glad that I figured it out. The second thing was that I did not believe that the Bad Batch could actually have overtaken Ventress. They have this moment where they're fighting, and then Crosshair pulls up the gun, and they go dun 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 dun, dun, and she's like, "Put your guns down," and they're like, "We don't follow orders," and all this, and I was sitting in my seat thinking, "There's no way. I just don't believe it. I don't believe." As great as the Bad Batch are, that they actually could have, especially when we watched that fight happen, and it was like all sped up. It was like, man, she was like completely owning them. They got to this point where they sort of flip it and they'd be like, it looks like we were getting owned, but we survey the scene and figure it out, and we're able to actually overcome our enemy, which is Ventress in this case. And I was just like, I just don't believe it. I don't believe that the Bad Batch would actually be able to beat Asajj Ventress in a fight 3-1 even. Sure enough, as the episode continued, they couldn't beat her. Because as soon as they started firing, she was able to dodge all that. She pulls out her lightsaber. They get into a bigger fight, and she is winning. She's like choking Wrecker, and Hunter's down on the ground, and obviously winning the fight when Omega shows up. So I was like, okay, good. Wow. I thought for a second they were going to try to convince me of one thing, but it turns out the reality is what I thought. Good writing. You got me. The third thing that tricked me was we got to the very end of the episode, and she tells Omega that she doesn't have a high M count. Sorry. And I was like, this is like an audience reveal that after everything we've been through, she tested Omega and she doesn't actually have any affinity for the Force, or she doesn't have an high M count for what I don't understand. This doesn't make any sense. And I fell for it because as soon as Omega walks away, the Bad Batch calls her out, says, "You're lying." And she's like, the reason I said what I said is because since she does in fact have all of those things, we already know she has an IM count, which Omega sort of points out. She's like, but I already am being, followed by the Empire. What Asajj is looking at is the fact that she is in fact potentially capable of being greater and having Force abilities to some degree. So she lies to Omega and lets the regular, her parents, if you will, the adults, which both of those are not true, but you get what I'm saying, actually make the decision about her well-being as far as if you do pursue this, she's going to have to go away from you, which is very, again, Mandalorian. It's sort of like you could give Grogu to a teacher or you could take Grogu with you. It was that sort of deal. Again, we're seeing that parallel, but I'm really interested to see where the choices are going to go. But again, I fell for it, so I was right on board the whole way through. What a good episode, honestly. I do always point out one thing that I didn't like about an episode. And I will do this quickly because it wasn't that big of a deal. My first thought initially was, a big kaiju monster. Of course, they rely on this too much. And then I started thinking about what other things Ventress could have done in order to convey all of the same things. We have to have the Bad Batch guys arrive in their ship. They have to worry that Omega's in trouble. We have to have it happen unintentionally. We have to have it be something that like Ventress couldn't control in the beginning, but is able to control later. And I really thought about all the details, and I thought, you know what? Actually, the monster coming from the deep, that's actually a perfect thing to do. What didn't I like about it? I didn't like that it had tentacles. I think that's really what bothered me more than anything, is that the creature comes up over the water and then it sticks its head out and it's rocking the boat, and they're in danger, and they could be in danger for a number of different reasons, but it just feels cheap and gimmicky and feels like an old sci-fi flick or something when it's like, and like all of a sudden it has these tentacles that could just grab a character, and it's easy to like pull them down, and it's easy to cut it off to rescue that character. I just thought there could have been something more. And when I started going down that, I was like, okay, well, there could be a giant creature who's knocking the boat. Ventress could jump on the top. She could ride it. She could tame it. They could do all sorts of things with swimming in the water that doesn't have to do with tentacles. Like I said, she could ride it. And I was thinking like Dune style. Dune's popular. I don't know. I mean, they were probably working on this before that movie came out, but you know what I'm saying. I don't like that it had tentacles. It felt like the battle became too easy, and I wanted to see something different that we haven't seen in the Bad Batch. But, all this to say, Asajj is back. We're getting Asajj Ventress again. Hopefully more. She might be gone already. I don't know. I hope that we see more of this character. I hope that we see more of Fennec Shand. It would be great to show both of these characters, since they're obviously working together, return at a later episode, or hopefully from this point forward. That would be really cool too, if you sort of were able to get a team together that, you know, they were able to work. Like, again, I'm doing so many Mandalorian things, but like Boba Fett works on his own, but also the Mandalorian and Boba Fett go together. You know, they're working together pretty regularly. It would be cool to see this team back together. And also Boba Fett. Gosh, how does Boba Fett fit into this? We need to see it. I want to see it. This was a great episode. Let me know what you guys thought of this episode, The Harbinger, with Asajj Ventress returning. And if you hope to see more of Bad Batch episodes that are similar to this. Let me know, and also make sure to like the video and all that other stuff. But also catch us on the Resistance broadcast. This is just our Bad Batch reaction show, but we do regular episodes of podcast Star Wars related things. We talk about discussions and the news twice a week, every week on the Resistance broadcast. So check us out, and I don't know. Until next week, I'll see you later.